On January 14th, 1963, just a little more than half a century ago, my teacher, Abraham Joshua Heschel, standing next to Martin Luther King in Chicago, commented on the piece of Torah that we just read from the book of Exodus. Heschel said then, and I'm quoting, "We are all pharaohs or slaves of Pharaoh. It is sad to be a slave of Pharaoh. It is horrible to be a Pharaoh. Amen. Daily we should take account and ask, what have I done today to alleviate the anguish, to mitigate the evil, to prevent humiliation?" Heschel says, "Let there be a grain of prophet in every man. Our concern must be expressed not symbolically, but literally, not only publicly, but privately, not only occasionally, but regularly. What we need is the involvement of every one of us as individuals. What we need is restlessness, a constant awareness of the monstrosity of injustice." Now, Heschel understood what it meant to leave Pharaoh's Egypt behind. He himself fled Nazi Europe. But Heschel decried oppression everywhere, especially when he arrived here in his beloved country of refuge, the United States. And that is why Heschel said he prayed with his feet when he joined Martin Luther King Jr. in the Selma March 50 years ago. Selma, as the movie reminds us, was about two things in particular. It was about police violence against blacks and about voting rights. Dr. King taught us this, that voting rights lead to all other rights in our democracy. Amen. How terribly sad that half a century later, we witness again the attempt to roll back our voting rights by a major political party. And even in this city, we continue to witness police violence against blacks with apparent impunity. These are issues about which we must continue to stand together, as did Rabbi Heschel and Reverend King. And as Reverend King so patiently taught us, even at the cost of his life, we must stand against violence, all violence, but especially religious violence. Amen. We can protest against violence, and we must. We can engage in dialogue against interreligious hatred, and we must. Indeed, Reverend Jacqui and I have traveled literally halfway around the globe to engage in dialogue with the religious other in an ongoing effort to teach the love that God commands. But there is more that we can do and we must. For we are taught to feed the hungry, to shelter the homeless, to clothe the naked, to heal the sick, to provide work for our needy sisters and brothers. And these are things that we can and must do together. Yes, we should pray with our feet, and we must. But we must also pray with our hands and our backs and our very souls. A prayer of service to others done together as an act of interreligious and interracial love. Only so can we bring God's children out from the burdens of Pharaoh. Only so can we be sure not to be Pharaoh ourselves. Only so will we honor Martin King's memory and keep alive his vision. As Rabbi Heschel taught us, daily we should take account and ask, what have I done today to alleviate anguish, to mitigate the evil, to prevent humiliation? Let there be a grain of prophet in every person.
Amen. There is a grain of prophet in everyone. And sometimes we can't see it. We can't wrap our minds around it. Like Moses, for example. Moses wondered over and over again whether he was qualified for the job that God had called him to. God says, I'll be with you. Moses wants to know, who is it that's sending me to Pharaoh? I think it's more that Moses wanted to know the kind of God that was sending Moses to Pharaoh rather than just knowing God's name. And God said, tell them I am sent you. YHWH. 4 letters in the Hebrew language with no vowels. Tell them I am sent you. I am who I am, or I will be who I will be. Moses, perhaps resisting God like maybe many of us do at some time or another, kind of kept raising arguments, right? He goes, I don't think I can speak very well. I don't think my tongue is circumcised. I don't think I have good words to do. And I love the way God convinces Moses. Take this staff, throw it on the ground. Moses throws the staff on the ground, it turns into a snake. God says, pick up the snake. See? It turns back into a staff. See? Show him that, God says. And then take your hand. Okay, put your hand inside your coat. Put your hand outside your coat. Leprosy, not leprosy. See? Show him that. And if that doesn't work, take this vial of water and pour it on the ground. It'll turn into blood. That'll show him. God gave Moses signs and wonders and tricks to do to show how present God was with him. But I think Moses still had resistance to this sense of prophecy, Bert. Maybe we're all that way, just a little bit. Maybe, Bert, when we went to Oman and we went to the mosque, that amazing air-conditioned mosque in the desert, and you open the door and the fresh breath of God comes flying out of the mosque into the desert wind. Maybe those guys showing us around had a little bit of prophet in them, but they weren't sure. Maybe that grandmother who cautioned that 8-year-old not to hate had a little bit of prophet in her, but she wasn't sure. Maybe those few policemen that refused to turn their back on the mayor, just refused to go along with the status quo. Maybe they had a little prophet in them, but they weren't sure. Maybe the mother whose son's been killed, and instead of saying, let's rage about this race thing, she says, I don't think this is about race after all. I think we just have to love more. Maybe she's got a little prophet in her, and she's not sure. I know that there are days that I feel on my prophetess high horse, confident and sure and ready to do battle with the devil. But there are other days when I think to myself, oh my God, I'm so tired. I can't possibly have anything meaningful to do or say to heal the world. Not today. And then I remember this. It's actually not about me at all. When God was sending Moses to do battle with Pharaoh, God said over and over again, I am the Lord. I am God. I am Yahweh. I will be who I will be. I will do what I will do. In other words, it's my thing. I am the power in this partnership. I am the breath of life inside you, inspiring good works, enabling you to have good words to say, giving you stamina for the journey. It's not about you at all. It's all about me. And from throwing staffs on the ground to parting wide seas, to praying with our feet, to marching for justice, to teaching young children how to love, every one of those acts of prophecy happen because our God is able to do more than we can ask or imagine through God's power at work within us. I love saying we're the ones we've been waiting for. That's one of my favorite expressions from June Jordan's poem. But the truth of the matter is, we're not the ones we've been waiting for. God is the one we've been waiting for. And God's waiting on us. What do you think, Bert?
I think God does make us all prophets. A little earlier someone came up to me in the pew and asked whether Jews believed Jesus was a prophet and believed that Muhammad was a prophet. And I had to say that that was not part of Jewish belief. But the reality is we're all prophets. We all have that power. One of the great paradigms of prophecy is Abraham. And I always think of that famous passage in Genesis 22 that God commands Abraham, and Abraham lifts the knife. And I like to think that that act can be replicated. Not, God forbid, that we lift the knife to our children, although when my kids were teenagers, it sometimes did seem to make sense. But we can lift the knife here at Middle Church. You can lift the knife to spread the peanut butter on the bread that feeds the hungry. Yeah. That's an act of prophecy.
Absolutely.
And when you're tired and you're out of words, just spreading peanut butter is God's work. And it's a way of humbling ourselves to say, this is what needs to be done. And whether we're Jewish or Muslim or Christian, we all share that value that we need to feed the hungry and clothe the naked and shelter those without homes. And these are things that we can do on a daily basis, every one of us.
We can. And we can also stand together and love each other. That's an act of prophecy, too. You know, it doesn't require fancy degrees, although that's nice. It doesn't require fancy words, although they're lovely. Love is an act of prophecy. Love is an action that heals and cures and sustains and holds. Love is something each of us can do. And I mean, I was listening to John Lewis this morning on NPR. That is a humble dude, you know? John Lewis was in SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, as a 23-year-old, was the first person to walk on that first march across the Pettus Bridge and got his brains beat out. Yeah. Unconscious he was. This guy has no malice. This guy has no bitterness. He has no guile. He says he had to learn to love, but he learned to love and he loves. He has no bitterness against his enemies. He has no bitterness against those people who oppressed him. Love like that is world-altering love, prophetic love. And each and every person in this room and everyone in our circle of influence has the ability to change the culture with love.
I want to share another piece of John Lewis's Torah because in addition to his really embodying love, of having been beaten and yet getting up to continue the walk, John Lewis, we gave him an honorary degree at my Jewish Theological Seminary, much as 50 years earlier, we gave a degree to Martin King. Yeah. And John Lewis, with that twinkle in his eye, said, yeah, you got to love, but you got to make trouble. That's right. You got to make God's trouble. That's what we're put here on earth for. Now, John Lewis, he knew how to make trouble, right. And it was good trouble. And the trouble he made lasted maybe 50 years. And now it's our turn. We got to make trouble again. We got to be in the streets. We got to be spreading peanut butter and jelly. We got to be going to churches and synagogues and sometimes traveling all the way to Muscat, Oman. Yep. One of the great things about Jacqui and me going to Oman is I went down because the Jewish holidays kind of followed immediately on our conference. I went down to Salalah. How many of you have been to Salalah? Show of hands.
Yeah, no, just you.
It's the world capital of frankincense and myrrh. So I have to say, not a lot to see there, but the place smells great. And this Jew who went to that Muslim country was able to bring home all this frankincense so that come Christmas time, I could give it to my Christian friends.
Amen.
Right?
Amen.
Now that's good trouble.
That's good trouble. So, Moses was called and didn't think he had the stuff. God said, I am who I am. I am. I got it. I got you. I got this. I got this. Whether it's feeding the hungry or marching for justice or dying in or laying in or giving frankincense to your Christian friends, you are called by God to do what you're supposed to do in your corner of the world, trouble the waters, heal the world, love the lost, stand up for the marginalized, be a peacemaker.
There was a mayor of Berlin at the time that Berlin was divided. His name was Willy Brandt. Willy Brandt was a socialist, and he was a good man. They say, I didn't go see it when I was in Berlin, but they say that on his tombstone it says, he did what he could. And that's not a small thing. If every one of us did what we could, then we are living out our calling.
Amen. Amen.
And you said it, Jacqui, it's so easy to be frightened of it. It's so easy to think we don't have the words, we don't have the power. We can't do. But if each of us does what we can, then we are truly called.
And I think, Bert, what we're called to right now is urgent business. Like, we're called to dismantle these crazy polarities of blue versus black and black versus white and rich versus poor. We're called to have a creative imagination and not let people turn us against each other and should on each other. We're called to be nuanced in our thinking and in our analysis and not run into stereotypes. Stereotypes are cheap. Stereotypes are for wusses. We're called, is that okay to say? Stereotypes are for the weak. We're called to love each other's particularity. And we do not, as King says, and let's let him have the last word, we don't have the luxury of cooling off or taking the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promise of democracy. Now is the time to rise up from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation out of the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood and sisterhood. Now is the time, Bert, to make justice a reality for all of God's children.
That fierce urgency of now.
The fierce urgency of now.
One of the earliest rabbinic teachings asks a very simple question about the book of Genesis. It says, why did God create Adam as a singular human being? And the answer is astonishing. It's so that no one on earth can say, my ancestor was greater than your ancestor. We all share the same ancestor, and that ancestor was created in the image and likeness of God. So whatever color you are, whatever
Africa, by the way.
socioeconomic.
Did you hear me? In Africa, by the way.
In Africa,
Yeah.
Indeed, in Africa. You know, that's what we need to remember, is we all share that same image and likeness of God.
Amen.
It's like you sang, right? When you look at you, you have to see God, you have to see Jesus. And that is a lesson that we can all take to heart. Amen.
So it shall be written. So it shall be done. Thank you, son.